folks, we're going to get started in just a couple minutes. We're going to wait for some more people to join, but welcome. Hey everyone, welcome. We're going to give everyone just another minute or two to join. As you're logging on, feel free to say hello in the chat, maybe share where you're joining us from today. It's great to see so many folks joining. Hi, Norma, welcome. Hello, Josh. Hello, Ron. Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute. As you're joining, feel free to say hello in the chat and tell us where you're joining us from today. All right. Well, folks are going to still continue to join, but so feel free to, continue saying hello in the chat, but we're going to get started just in the interest of time. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining AI in the Corequisite Mathematics Classroom, Navigating Equity, Implementation, and Policy. We're thrilled to have you with us today. My name is Julie Adams, and I serve as the site strategist for Strong Start to Finish. Strong Start to Finish is a national initiative that supports student success by scaling reforms in developmental education across higher education systems and institution intermediaries. This session is part of our developmental education reform learning community and is the second session of a special two-part series hosted in partnership with Every Learner Everywhere, a national network of organizations that advocate for equitable outcomes in U.S. higher education through advances in digital learning. Today's session will focus on the real-world application of AI in Corequisite mathematics classrooms. This session is interactive, and we encourage you to place questions and comments in the chat throughout the session. However, we do ask that you please remain muted until instructed otherwise. Lastly, this session is being recorded. If for any reason you do not wish to be recorded, please feel free to remain with your video off or exit the session at any time. Now I'm pleased to introduce our leads for today's session. Susan Adams is Associate Director of Teaching and Learning at Achieving the Dream. Welcome, Susan. Eric Fierro is Project Manager at Achieving the Dream and Adjunct Faculty Member at Montgomery College. And last but not least, Dr. Van Davis is Chief Strategy Officer at WCET, the WICHE Cooperative for Educational Technologies. Susan, Eric, and Van, we appreciate you being with us today to share your knowledge and expertise. And with that, I will turn it over to you all.
Greetings, everybody. Get us going here. So today we're going to go through a number of phases talking about AI, get into some tools, and get through some discussion points. We want to give you opportunities to ask questions and engage and try some things out. So we're excited about this. So we're going to do a quick poll to get started, see who's in the room in terms of your thoughts. Then we're going to move into kind of discussing democratizing education through AI. Like we like to think of this as the promise, because as Susan always likes to talk about, like it is still a promise because it's being realized and there's value to it. And she has, so well put that so many times that I just butchered exactly everything she says, and that's okay. And then we're going to get into a brief discussion about some ethical considerations and what that means in the classroom. And then we'll move into a discussion and a practical application area where we're going to look at actual prompting, ways students might use AI, and ways you as faculty might use AI in your practice daily. And then lastly, we're going to get into an actual discussion about policy and AI policy, what it's looking like globally, what it's looking like in the classroom, and everywhere in between. And we've got some wonderful resources to share from that. So what I'd like to invite you to do is you're going to put in here pullev.com/efiero412. And you're going to respond to the question, what are your biggest concerns about AI in the classroom? Give you a moment to do that. So again, you can respond to this by going to pullev.com/efiero412 and respond to that question. Pushing here on my screen a little bit to see if that'll help. Not really. I got a new external monitor here, and it's playing with me in resolution form. So I see privacy here.
Eric, we're not seeing it. It's only showing half your screen.
Yep, I'm trying to see if I can adjust it. We'll just move on in a second if I can't figure it out quick. All right, we're just going to go ahead and I see some stuff coming in here. Ethics, students are cheating. I can see some of the responses myself. Misinformation. And I think those are some really big things. I see ethics has come in a couple times now. And so that's something that we are going to get to later on, which is a great starting point for us. So Susan, let's go ahead and hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Eric, and thanks, Julie. Delighted to be here with Van and you. We'll give a kind of level set here of the definitions of AI and how we've kind of gotten here. So really hold on, I just realized. So we've all experienced AI in our everyday tools, right? So we use autocorrect, Google Maps for navigating. We often get recommendations for streaming services. All of that is a predictive, right? And it's run through an algorithm. And we've had that for many years. So what's changed? Well, there was a groundbreaking paper titled "Attention is All You Need" that came out in 2017 that revolutionized AI's approach to language. So it introduced a new method of creating AI systems, particularly adept at understanding human language. So this method involved processes known as transformers and attention mechanisms. So the result has emerged these large language models, or you've sometimes seen the word LLMs. So these are ChatGPTs, Geminis, and others that we'll share with you today. So these models represent a significant leap in AI's capabilities, not just in language, but also in art, video, and other creative tasks. So collectively, they form generative AI. So that's different from what we've experienced before. And so these iterations that are happening are focusing on creating new content. And so the principle behind them is they're predictive, but they predict what words come next in a sentence. So through extensive training process involving billions of documents and significant computational power, these models have learned to understand language at a much deeper level, and it's actually becoming relational when we interact with them. So they uncover connections between words, and they use knowledge to predict subsequent words, and kind of like an advanced version of autocomplete, but with a relational piece to it. So the evolution of these models has been rapid and remarkable, as we're all experiencing. And these models now perform exceptionally well, even on tests, and they're outperforming humans. They have seen that ChatGPT-4 scored in the 98th percentile in the verbal GRE exam and 85th percentile in law exams. So it's really going to beg all of us, it's going to require all of us to really rethink what is assessment and what is learning, and we'll get to that. So there's Perplexity, which is one tool that I've been using a lot for the academic research. A lot of academics like it because it gives an interface of citations for articles in a much better way than ChatGPT does. So that's one that we're promoting only in that it's one that we've seen a lot of academics use. And then, of course, there's ChatGPT and Gemini. And some of you may have discovered Pi.ai, and this is more of a coach. It's sort of your personal AI that's more of a coach and almost a therapist. And it's been really interesting to test that one out and see how that interfaces with my life, more in kind of a personal way, and also for emotional intelligence, which I've really been fascinated by. And it was started by Mustafa Suleyman, who is now the CEO in Microsoft's AI department. But he wrote the book, The Coming Wave, which really gives kind of a historical progression of how AI has come into our world.
And just kind of briefly here, I wanted to highlight a few education-specific AI tools that have been developed, and these are just 3 examples of it. There are many others that are coming out of the woodworks any day. Just before we got started, we were talking briefly about Conmigo. There's a bunch of new education-specific tools that are coming out. These ones are ones that are kind of more broad education-specific tools. They provide AI tools to support identifying opportunities for relevancy to students. They provide tools to build depth of knowledge assignments or to assess various types of your or elements of your lecture planning, your curriculum, things like that. I did want to note though that of these 3, Magic School and EduAid have free versions available, because I do think that, as we talk about all these AI tools, price becomes an element of the discussion, and these bills can add up. So I wanted to note that Magic School and EduAid have free versions. And I think in both instances, it basically just limits how many prompts you can do per day, similar to some other AI tools. Socrat.ai has a free trial, but beyond that, it requires paid versions anyways. And to be perfectly frank, for all of you math faculty, I don't think Socrat.ai is a super helpful tool, because it's mostly based around kind of like the Socratic method of thinking and interacting with a conversational bot. And I don't know how much you're going to be using that tool, but maybe you have a great way to do it. Maybe you do. I don't know. But I wanted to share those 3 tools briefly.
So when we think about AI democratizing education, it's crucial to underscore that generative AI serves as a tool. So it grants us the autonomy to shape its application in our daily lives and our educational environments. That's what's really important about it. It's not going to be perfect. It will hallucinate. And we have to be the +1. We have to be the human that gets to interact with it and know that it's a tool that we need to shape and be critical about. So as we navigate the implications of that, it's essential to remember that the power to define its role rests with us. So we're collectively striving for a critical equilibrium right now so that we can maximize its benefits while also addressing its challenges, which we're going to get to next by hearing directly from Ethan Mollick, who has this quote, AI is not just a tool for automating routine tasks, it's a catalyst for reimagining how we teach and learn. So let's hear from Ethan.
So among many things that I've explored with AI over part of this class, I want to tell you a little about that.
We can't hear it, Eric. It's not sound sharing.
Is going to look like in classrooms in the near future. And so the answer is it's going to be undetectable, ubiquitous, and transformative. And all these images, by the way, I did in Mid-Journey in 3 seconds, right? So if they all have the right number of fingers now, that problem is solved. But it's pretty amazing you can generate these kind of graphics instantly, right? But undetectable in that we know that you cannot detect AI plagiarism, right? Not just in the short term, it's possible. In the long term, it's not possible. There's both theoretical reasons why it's not possible, but also I found that when I prompt my students to actually do a good job writing AI-based essays, they become undetectable. Just 2 or 3 rounds, and it's impossible for any of these systems to find out what they are. So you're not going to be able to detect AI plagiarism. And of course, who knows what plagiarism is anymore, right? Is working with the AI to come up with an outline that you don't use plagiarism. Asking it for 30 ideas for your essay and picking the one you like best, plagiarism. Asking to rewrite a paragraph that you didn't like before. I've had students come up to me and say, English is my 4th language, and I don't do very well in English, and people don't take me seriously as a result, and now I just use AI to do all the writing, and now I'm taken seriously. Is that bad? Is that plagiarism? We don't know. We have to grapple with some of these questions in a serious way. Ubiquitous in that what makes AI so interesting is it's a tool available to over 1 billion people right now. And if you're rich, you have no better access than if you don't have a lot of money, right? The same tool is available everywhere. You can use GPT-4, the latest model, free through Bing. Hint be in the purple creative mode, that's what uses GPT-4. And you can actually use this system right now to every teacher everywhere. right? So everything that you guys are doing in building ed tech, there's now a universal AI in everybody's hands. It is ubiquitous, not just among students, but among teachers. Not everyone's figured that out yet, but they will soon. And it's transformative in that we don't quite know what to do with this, right? I was on the stage yesterday and I was saying the original definition of the singularity, you may have heard of the AI singularity, right? The idea of a singularity is past that point, we can't predict what's gonna happen. And that's where we are right now. If you ask me, and I teach at a business school, what the future of jobs looks like 2 to 3 years out, I don't really know. I know that we're seeing 20 to 80% performance improvements at white-collar tasks with AI. 20 to 80%. Steam power was 25%. I don't know what we do with that information, right? I don't know whether people do more work than they did before, whether the nature of jobs changes. I can't give you an answer to that, but we don't know what's going to happen. A lot is going to happen in the near future. And it's transformative to education, too. I think that we have a real advantage here on the education side for those who are educators that I think we're going to be fine. I think that what we just saw from the amazing speech by Salkan is that there are tools that will make education better and more effective. We'll figure out, there'll still be a need for classrooms. At least in the medium term, we're fine. We'll figure this stuff out. But is
So Ethan's bringing some somewhat provocative ideas here, and basically saying that we're going to be fine. And I don't want that to land as something that we're necessarily saying here. But we're here to help, and we're here to be your thought partner. And we really want to orient, especially to the math curriculum, of how are students going to end up using ChatGPT to enhance their learning in a math class. So we're going to get to asking you all that question in a moment. But we want to also speak to some of our questions and concerns. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is how can we explore the margins of what I like to call AI-assisted learning? So kind of shifting the mindset from plagiarism to how can we actually enhance learning, and how can it be assisted by this powerful tool that's now in the hands of our students? What might the margins be for the assignments that I'm going to be giving my students in my class so that they can use it to have more empowerment in their learning, but also be held accountable for not just being seduced by it, giving them the answer? And that's where we get to redesign our assignments and think deeply about how we can do that in an effective way at the course design level. And we're going to hear from a faculty member who was surprised by AI, and hear her story and how she responded to the dawn of it showing up in her classroom. Actually, yeah, well, let's do her. We'll go back to that slide, Eric, after we do her video. Thanks.
In my classroom, one of my students did an essay, turned it in, and then even before it was graded, approached me to say, hey, so I used artificial intelligence to write my essay. Was I cheating? And I, at the time, didn't even know what he meant by artificial intelligence. I was that green about the whole topic. I just didn't know. And I asked him, and he told me, he explained to me how it worked and what he did and how much he had done. And then he just genuinely wanted to know, did I cheat? He was really wanting to have that conversation. So I opened it up to the whole class and we talked about it. They also didn't know what it was. They did come to the conclusion in just that kind of first discussion that he was cheating, but they also thought he was amazing because he had this, he was on the top of the curve in terms of knowing what was going on and what was coming, and he certainly was. So the following semester, I just knew that this was going to.
Shouldn't be the end, right?
In my he was on the top of the curve in terms of knowing what was going on and what was coming, and he certainly was. So the following semester, I just knew that this was going to be a thing. So I started looking into it, and then once they had opened up ChatGPT to the general public as a testing, bot to sort of get some feedback, I jumped on and started looking into it and took off from there. In my class.
Yeah, so Nancy kind of is an early adopter, right? It showed up even before ChatGPT came up onto the world, and a student came to her. And the transparency that I love that she approached it with was, well, let's ask the whole class. I don't have the answer. Let's be in a community of practice, essentially, where the students are the curriculum in a way. And I love that. She really centered the students there and asking them that question. So one of the things I've been reflecting about is this notion of the concept of productive struggle, the idea that certain challenges are essential for deep learning. So where does AI fall short in depriving our students of this necessary struggle? So it's incumbent upon us to determine where that line lies in our assignments and to thoughtfully integrate AI into our classrooms. So deciding when and how AI tools are utilized will be crucial to preserving the integrity of the learning process. And again, get to that spectrum where we want to give them power and agency, but also accountability. So I'm going to ask each of you to take a moment here, and we're going to give you a scenario on the next slide where a student solves the problem on their math quiz independently, but uses an AI tool to check the correctness of their quiz answers before submitting them. They do not correct mistakes directly based on the AI solutions, but use the feedback to identify errors and rework the problem on their own. Now, this was given to us by April Crenshaw, who's a colleague at Chattanooga, and she is a statistics instructor and brought this scenario forward to us. And what I want you to think through is this cheating, not cheating, or a gray area? And I welcome you putting this in the chat and or coming off mic. We'd love to hear somebody share with us their thinking about whether or not this would be cheating or not cheating and why. I see we're resounding not cheating so far. Why is that? Why is it not cheating? And I see a gray area. Christine or Lynette, would you be willing to come off mic and let us know why you decided it's a gray area for you? And again, there's no right answer. This is personal to each instructor. Checking work is encouraged, I see.
I'm trying to unmute.
Yeah.
Hey,
Thanks,
good
Lynette.
afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Lynette. Yeah, it's a very good practice of asking students to use AI-based feedback to identify errors, and that is a way of learning. But I am unsure how much students would actually practice that and not use it to provide the answers, or choose a shortcut to complete their assignments. So it's basically, it depends on the students and how those expectations have been communicated to students on how exactly should we be using those AI tools. But it is definitely a good practice because we've nowadays talk about a lot of AI based tutoring or tutoring assistance. So that is a good practice. But again, here, if they are not being guided well, then it would take the wrong turn.
Got it. Got it. And you might see that in a test result at the end, right? If they didn't use it for this checking of their answers and continued to use it in a way that is not holding them accountable, you might see that in their test results and check in with them about it, right? But I love, Lynette, that you're already encouraging them and you're finding those margins, as Eric is saying, but you're encouraging them to go ahead and check their work and use it as the tool that we hope that they would use it for. So that's a great modeling there. Anybody else comments on this scenario?
So this is Christine, and I said gray area too. When it comes to quizzes and tests, I'm not sure I want them to check their answer and redo it. That's not showing us that they have learned what we've taught them. It hasn't showed, I agree we could use it for their assignments, and I do use it for when we do outlines. I'm questioning whether we really want them to use it for tests and quizzes, to check it and then redo it.
Got it. Yeah, not certain yet. That makes sense, Christine. And also in a test taking scenario, right? We don't want to have the answers right there. It's really challenging their mind to be able to recall what the answer would be and go through the process of that productive struggle. Christine, I do hear that margin is there for you. Great. Well, let's go to the next scenario. So this is a coding project. So a student uses an AI program to generate a sorting algorithm, learns from its logic, and writes their version of the code without direct copying. Would this be cheating, not cheating, or a gray area? We got a gray area and we got a not cheating, not cheating. Any coding instructors in the house that teach coding specifically, and if they would be willing to share their answer?
Hello, I'm Milena Cuellar. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Milena.
I teach stats with R. And I think I said not cheating for two reasons. One of the reasons is if I haven't defined or I haven't said to the students if they're allowed or not to use AI, it's hard for me to like judge their behavior if I don't know what is going on, if I don't give them some limitations or like what they can do with the resources they have at hand. But I think the main reason for not cheating is that again, they're using that to empower them in the learning process and to realize what really, they can do with someone who is human, but they don't have it, access to when they're at home. So that really provides support for them. And it's a question of equity. So I think it's good. If someone cannot access tutors, they can access AI and see if they can do better.
Wonderful, Milena. Couldn't have said it better myself. That's great. Yeah, especially with the co-requisite model, right? We're going to have students that are in this space where they're uplifting themselves and catching up in some respects, and having, some in tandem support. And here we've got a 24/7 tutor. But the key is, and I think you're really saying and speaking to this, is that we've got to teach them how to actually do that, right? So this is where we're going to need some AI units in our class. We're going to need some coaching and some instructions in our syllabi that really speak to how do you leverage it, again, to be that tutor, and in this case, to be in a step-by-step process. And it's going to be things like, I invite you to use AI here, here, and here, but not here. And this is what that can look like in modeling it. So I'm happy to hear that championing there. Anybody else for this scenario?
I wonder if Brad would be okay coming off and speaking to what he put in the chat.
Sure, I was just pointing out that for an assignment like this, I struggle sometimes, and I see it in my math classes a lot, where I don't see it as cheating per se, but it still might be worthwhile having a conversation with the student about the importance of developing the thought process on their own rather than jumping to the technology first. So even though the student is doing all the work on their own, I think part of the idea is coming through with that algorithm of what it should look like, what is the basic thought process to get there. The coding itself isn't as important sometimes as figuring out how do I talk to the computer to get it to that point. And we see the same thing in mathematics, that it's not so much about going through the steps as knowing what steps to do and why you should be doing them. So I think it's a little bit of a gray area, but a good time to have a conversation with the student to say, hey, you can use this as a crutch every now and then, but at some point you also got to sort of get to the point where you go through those steps for the learning.
Oh, I love that, Brad. And that's where your margin is, right? Like you really have experience. You are an expert. You've watched many students go through this productive struggle, and you see where that margin is that you want to make sure they actually experience. And then being transparent about that by saying what you just said, and I would even do that to the whole class, right? Like really speak to, this is how the learning is going to actually integrate, and where, it's going to come for you, is going to go a long way for them feeling like you're a partner to their learning, right? And not just that sort of sage on the stage that many of us have moved away from, but can be traditionally known in the classroom. So thank you for that, Brad. Anybody else before we move on to the next scenario? All right, let's go to the next slide. This is another one from April. No, actually, maybe not. I'm so glad you're here, April. You're welcome to weigh in with comments if you would like. This is a lab report writing assignment where a student uses AI to structure a lab report. So there's some narrative in here and draft sections based on their data. It revises the AI's output and adds their experimental data and procedure. So this is almost like an outline for an essay. Is this cheating, not cheating, or a gray area? Give you a moment to think about that. Thanks, Brad. Not cheating, but turning a bit gray. I'd love to hear what you're thinking there, Milena, if you would be willing.
Yeah, I think what I was thinking was like at the moment when I read, like, yeah, this is not cheating, but they need to develop that skill of being able to write narrative. So if they do it once, to learn how that happens and how you can like model the language to be able to write the sections, because that's something that is going to become very automated later when they are skilled. Then, it's like how they get skilled to it. So it's similar to what the comment from Brad was before, like they need to like use it and then leave it and then become independent of it at some point. But at the same time, these tasks are very automated. So it's like, it's good that we have AI to do these things for us because we spend less time doing things that are very repetitive and very much the same. And you just, spend your time doing the analysis of the experimental data, etc. So that's why I was like, yeah, but maybe not.
What I also hear you pointing to, Milena, there is, what is the learning outcome for the assignment? Is it to know how to write an outline? Or is it to be able to analyze data, right? Like, what is it that they're actually learning? And then that's can also inform the margins too for the assignment. And in declaring to students, please, not please, but do not use it for X, Y, or Z, but use it for H. So I love that comment. Anybody else?
I wrote something. I'm a scientist. I do science, and before setting our experiment, I used to go and get like 15, 20 protocols, how other people did the same experiment, and read all of them, which basically AI does is like read them for you. I think as long as it shows that there are multiplicity and AI doesn't try to summarize it for you, because that's when you lose, I think, the diversity, and you see how many protocols you use that, That's when you develop your judgment, as Milena said. But you look, basically, you go and look in the internet media protocols for a Western blot, PCR. And then if the lab report is to analyze the data that you obtain and discuss this data, how is it reference to the references or what you expected or you don't expect, AI doesn't do that. AI cannot think. AI it's not a thinker. I mean, AI is kind of like a faker. I mean, it's like I want to analyze, I don't know, effect of genomics, alcohol in the brain. The AI doesn't understand what I'm talking about. So AI it has a limited level. So if it's a higher, the rational sophistication level of contrasting data with other data, and it's your own unique data, AI may not be able to capture that.
Great. Thank you, Leonardo. Yeah, so higher order thinking, right? I'm hearing you kind of talk about Bloom's taxonomy and that really high level analysis. Another way that can also be brought in is the student's lived experience. What is their cultural, norms? What's their way of knowing? And asking for more reflection there or application of the concept to their own personal lives and learning goals can also help to differentiate and help that higher order thinking that can be supported by AI, but it's not going to know. So that's another piece there too. So I would like to hear from all of you on the next slide. I would love to know, and I bet you there are some early adopters in the room, to come off of mic. You can also put it in the chat And let us know, how are you using generative AI in your classrooms? Are you using it for assignments? Are you having students use it as a tutor for them? What are some ways that you in your teaching practice are using AI, if at all? And some of you may not be at all, but we'd love to hear. I know there's expertise in the room. Pam's not using it. She needs ideas. Great. Glad you're here. Yeah, Eric's right, Pam. We are going to be giving you a whole prompt engineering tutorial essentially, and some great examples, but we wanted to just get a little hit if anybody in the room is using it. And if you're all newbies, even the better to be here. Study guides. Thanks, April. Awesome. Yeah, we've seen a lot of instructors tell their students to upload course materials to ChatGPT and Gemini and say, please make me a study guide, or share a study guide around or create a study guide around a particular topic. All right, we've got Milena. In the stats class, we use it to create case studies of statistical studies. In both cases, students discuss which examples are credible, accurate, or just not usable. I love that. That centers AI right in the center of the learning process, where the outputs get to be critiqued collectively in a peer-to-peer environment. That's a wonderful use. Old dog, new trick, Curtis. Glad you're here. Case studies is being applauded again. Resumes. Great. Generate practice tests based on concepts. That takes hours, right, Lisa? And now all of a sudden your course design time is cut in half, if not more. And to create in-class activities, Brad. Oh, do you have an in-class activity that you could share with us?
I've got a few that I've done for statistics that got students thinking about confidence intervals. There was a little candy experiment that we put candies into a jar, and it wrote all the steps for the students, and it's, you know, kind of laid it out of what they should do at the beginning, how to set it up, and just made it stepwise. And it was really easy to do in class, and I executed it and it went well.
Wow. Would you mind saying a little bit, what was the prompt that you gave it to create that? What did you say to it?
So I've actually had a couple different activities in my stats class, and I did something along the lines of saying I would like a 60-minute activity in which students are going to explore the use of confidence intervals through some experimentation. And I threw a lot of words like that at it. And I put the level of the course. I think I said it was for an elementary statistics course and a college level of a 100 level. And it came out. I was using just ChatGPT 3.5 to answer your question, John.
Great. You used the free one. It came out with quite a good answer. Yep. Nice. Well, I love it. You gave it context, you gave it audience, and you gave it specific parameters of 16 minutes, right? So we're going to talk about some of those elements, and the more specific you are, the better output you're going to get. So great example, Brad. Thank you. All right, Eric, I think we're moving on. So I think we've all talked about it already, which is wonderful. But we're thinking a lot about levels of adjustment. And actually, Ethan Mollick, who we already showed the video of, is well worth Googling and watching some of his other videos. He has a series of how to teach with AI that went viral a year ago. That's a great tool for you to kind of spark your thinking. And one of the things that he speaks to is that we can expect more from our students. I think Milena said this a couple of times, where, you know, let's have them not do things that are declarative that they can just get from ChatGPT. Let's have them go even further. And he gives a wonderful example of his entrepreneurial class, where students in a 7-week condensed course previously could only write a business proposal. Now he says, let ChatGPT write your business proposal, iterate on it, and then spend the 7 weeks prototyping it, building it out, creating personas. And they all made these awesome board games at the end of the class. And they were able to do that in 7 weeks. So we can expect more from students. We can also engage in better pedagogy. We've done a lot of equity-based pedagogies at Achieving the Dream, and doing a lot of professional development training around culturally responsive pedagogies which require you to really know your students and be able to create personalized learning paths. Now, this is something they can do, but also ChatGPT can help you at the course design level to really scale some of the more complex pedagogies we know works well, like active learning. And Brad did it. Brad put in a prompt to say, I had 16 minutes, I want it to be active. Here's what I would like, students to do in more of a application type of way, and I need ideas. That would have taken so much longer previous to AI. So better pedagogy, and then also adapting our assessment methods. Now, this is where I'm still looking for ideas, and we're trying to capture as many cases as possible of how you're now going to shift how you can assess students. And I think we're doing a lot of process and project-based learning, which is another great pedagogy, but our assessments get to really look at process now and be transparent. And there's other strategies that we are going to need to employ in order to assess our students. So those are the 3 levels of adjustment that are going to help in your thinking and also inspire you to do even better teaching and learning in your classrooms. So here we're going to show a video from a student. I think, Eric, we're going to stop it right before he gets to his example when she asked the second question. But we thought it's important to bring students' voices into the room. And this is one of Nancy's students that she interviewed to say, what do you want faculty to know about AI?
What do you want to tell faculty and students about how to approach the whole conversation of AI with your students?
I think that the conversation of AI really has to be approached with an open mind, because whether you like it or not, it's here to stay, most likely. It's not going to go anywhere, and people are going to use it because it's new technology and it's helpful, which is the main thing that I think faculty should see, that it's not doing all the work. In general, it's actually a helpful tool, especially when it comes to letting students create a format for their ideas and letting them streamline it and allowing them to actually create their essays with their own thoughts and ideas, but actually getting them started.
Okay. And for faculty to, you were saying
Talking about there, Susan?
should faculty
Keep going. Sorry.
approach this? What should faculty do in order to be able to approach it with an open mind?
I think they should have some hands-on experience with using it for an assignment. I know you used it for your class to help you come up with ideas for it, and that kind of helped you get acquainted with it and kind of see the trials and tribulations.
That some of the ideas were really bad.
Yeah, exactly. And that it's not just, please write this essay for me, and it poops out an essay.
Right.
And it's that easy.
Right.
Because
Okay.
it's not.
You were saying.
All right, so he's really making the point of let's play with this. And I love that students really are excited about it, that we're seeing from the most part. And the advice is to simply use it and play with it and see how it works in your context, critique it, maybe even try to break it. And also that he himself has been able to utilize it and learn well with it, because it's actually raised his curiosity and his motivation to use it as a tool for learning for himself. And she has said to us more than once that, and you'll hear from her a little bit later too, about how much her students are actually using it to enhance their learning. And they're easily holding themselves accountable for not cheating.
And I would just add that towards the end of that video, just noting he shares that in actuality he found that writing with AI was harder than writing himself, because he was frustrated by the tone and the language of the output. It wasn't his personality, which is a common thing we're hearing from folks. So we're going to kind of move forward now into thinking about how this can provide support for students and how we can use it as faculty. So in co-rec courses, we're looking to provide extra support for students, and we're looking to enhance the student success beyond maybe just like the basic level. So we're thinking about, how is AI providing this extra support? How can it? And what also is the availability of these extra supports? So some examples that our colleague Paula Talley, who's in the room right now, shared earlier is that, first of all, if you are teaching an OER course, AI is a very helpful tool because of ways that you can embed it, the ability to integrate AI outputs, because technically they're not licensed, so they are still open licensed. And there's just other elements that connect in there closely with OER. A big part that I like to point out here, because I'm not going to read all 5 of these bullets to you, but is the 4th bullet. Students feel safer talking to a bot because they don't know it. There's not a teacher's face in front of them. So they can ask a question and feel safe asking that question for feedback, maybe, that maybe if they were talking to you, they wouldn't feel safe asking. Because we all do our best as faculty members to build a rapport with our students where they will comfortably come to us, but that doesn't always work. And so I think that one of the biggest things to me is this ability for a student to interact with that chatbot. And I will say, chatbots are not infallible. They make mistakes with math problems. They give incorrect answers. They, Leonardo talked about like the data analysis. It is very deficient with data analysis sometimes, but this ability for students to interact with it in that way and feel maybe safer from their home to be able to interact with it is very helpful. So we can think about AI. Oh, go for it, Susan.
I just want to make sure that the OER was spoken to a little bit, Eric, only in that open educational resources are such a wonderful way to bring students' voice and also to make your material even more relevant. So AI is an opportunity to be a real thought partner and a supporter of learning to create new content, especially when it's done in groups and when students are wanting to update materials and even yourself. Again, it's going to be a great opportunity to advance. A lot of what we're trying to do is to lower textbook costs and create open educational resources.
Yeah. Thank you. And, being able to embed those OER resources so closely and quickly is great. So thinking about AI as a tutor, this is a really interesting ability to have within the kind of our courses. I teach music personally, music history. I'm like a musicology professor. And so this is something that I've been working on actively in my course for student writing and student understanding, because my students don't come in with like fundamental understandings of music sometimes. So I have built like a tutor chatbot just to help students start understanding language and things like that. But this is a really interesting way to start thinking about how we can utilize this to help our students that are coming at our content from a very fundamental level sometimes. And it gets very personalized, because that's one of those things that they often need. Students can create their own chatbots using some of these free AI tools, and it's a personalized learning tool then for them to be able to think about and learn in a way that works best for them. And also for that course, because they can provide the course material that you have shared with them. So this becomes a very specific tool and support for those students in learning and in growing and being able to get help that they might need. So some ways that we think about creating a prompt, and I encourage you to talk about this with your students, because so last week we did a presentation on AI at ATD, and Zia Hassan, who's a education faculty member, he talked about how we have to remember that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are not actually as good at technology as I think a lot of us often think they are. He said, remember, they're really good at apps. And I think that's a really good thing to remember, is that the younger generation hasn't had the problem solving process with technology that many of us did. They're very good at finding an app to solve a problem. So they maybe don't think about these steps. So it's good to have a conversation with your students and yourself about this. So our prompt creation techniques, and these come from OpenAI originally, start with number 1, defining your objective. That is the biggest thing. What is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the thing that you're trying to get out of it, the task? What is the objective that you're trying to get? Number 2 is providing context is really important. Making statements like, you are a expert college math tutor. You are a course designer for a college math class. Whatever that context and that caricature of the character of the AI chatbot that you want. Specify your request. Give specifics. The more vague you are, the more opportunity and likelihood of a hallucination to happen. Because And remember, hallucinations are when AI kind of like creates things out of nowhere. So being more vague and more general, it allows AI to be more likely incorrect or pull from incorrect sources or whatever. Be very specific. And lastly is, and this was an example given earlier by Brad, Susan pointed it out, mention any preferences or constraints. For example, if you need help with a 15-minute activity, if you need help with a 1 week section, if you need help with an entire course, whatever, give it the specific constraints and it will respond. And it's very helpful to give it those things. So these are our kind of 4 main things that we think about as we're thinking about prompt creation. And this is a skill. Prompt creation is very much a skill. So here's an example that I made for a student in a math class that they might take and use to work on things at home. I just put in this prompt, and I did play around with it a little bit, but I put this prompt into ChatGPT 4, and I had some really good responses from it, and I actually meant to have ChatGPT open right now because I wanted to show you what this looks like. So I put this prompt into, actually just for the sake of equity, let's look at what the free version is. Let's keep it to the free version here today. So I'm going to put this into my ChatGPT, and I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I do here. And this is what your students can do to get a tutoring help at home. So the prompt is, you are an expert math tutor for a college algebra course. I am a first-year student. I am studying for a test on complex numbers. Please help me review conjugates and the imaginary unit I. So I put that in, and it immediately starts giving me some information about conjugates, imaginary units. And see here, immediately it's giving me an example to illustrate things. And what I can say now is,
I love that it always says absolutely.
it's trying to have personality. It's
It
trying
really
to have,
is. Yeah.
At this point, I could say, if I was a student, I could be looking at the example and I could say, I just don't understand part 2 of that example. I can respond and say, can you give more information? Or I can't see where I'm typing. More information about part 2 of your example. And so what it'll do now is it's going to start giving me more specific breakdowns of each piece of this. And this would help a student a lot because it's not just showing you numbers, it's explaining step by step what's happening. And this is really helpful. And again, I would remind you to encourage your students to double check the AI's work because ChatGPT, especially 3.5, does have math errors. And also I'll remind you that if you use Bing or Microsoft Copilot, if your college, for example, pays for Microsoft Copilot, then GPT-4 is included in that. But 3.5 is free, so I encourage you, this is a great opportunity to teach that problem-solving skills. But double check the AI's work. But this is what it can do really quickly. I mean, you saw how fast that pumped out for my question. So I wanted to show that to you first. And now let's go back over here. Now, beyond that, for you as a course designer now, you can think about what it means to support you in building out assessments, in thinking about your students. So this is an example where we said, you are a college instructor teaching a course in calculus. Give me 3 authentic assignment ideas based on these course outcomes. And then you can take the course outcomes from your syllabus, copy and paste, dump it into ChatGPT, and it will give you some authentic assessment ideas. And then you can refine and interact and refine and interact. I've done this a number of times. If you have GPT-4, you can even upload a copy of your syllabus or your slides. And you can ask specifically for assessments based on one of your lectures or a PDF or whatever else it might be. And these can be really helpful examples of thinking of ways to, revitalize your course. Because I'm assuming some of you are like me, you've taught the same course for years and years and years, and sometimes it gets stale. And so for me, this has been really helpful in refreshing my course content. I feel like I have a whole new course sometimes. So it's been really great for me in that sense. So right now, what I want to encourage us to do is let's all take just a couple moments here. I want to encourage you to open up a chat of your choice. Could be Gemini, could be Claude, could be ChatGPT, could be Bing, could be whichever one you want. And I want you to think about a question of, what is something you might want help with? And just really quickly put a prompt in, tell it what you want, tell it who you are, and be specific. And then, we'll give you a moment to do that. And then I'd love for you to come back once you've done that and share what you saw, share what you thought about it. And while you do that, Susan, what are your thoughts? And I'd love to bring your voice in here.
Yeah, well, I'd love to make sure everybody feels comfortable to open up a new browser or their browser and is able to do a Google search for ChatGPT. And you can do it without, I believe, an account at this point, or Gemini. And we want to give a good couple of minutes of quiet for you to be able to play with it and then come back and share. But raise your hand or place in the chat if you need support on finding a generative AI tool. But we'll assume everybody's going to go play for a few minutes here, but we're here if you have questions. And one new strategy that Eric and I have found to be useful is that persona piece, right? So you are this, and it will give much stronger outputs. So remembering to give it a persona, are you a statistics instructor? Are you an Algebra 101 instructor? But tell it who it is, and then give it the instructions, and it'll match to that level. Thanks, April. Standalone Copilot is free. Great to know.
I'll add, interestingly, 2 of those 3 education tools that I mentioned earlier are based on GPT-4 also, and Claude. They pull from both.
Okay, let's bring everybody back. Eric.
All right, so I just would love if anyone would come off mute. We have enough time for one of you to share off mute if you want, or feel free to share in the chat. How was this for you? Did you feel like you got what you expected? Did you feel like it was not what you expected? Just any thoughts that you have right off the bat.
Especially those that are brand new that have just used it today.
Okay,
For the first time.
I asked it, I told it that I was a first year college student and that I wanted to be able to explain functions to a kindergartner.
Wow, what output did you get?
It said to start off with a real life example like eating breakfast. And then introduce the idea of inputs and outputs, like you're pushing a car, and the input is the car, the output is that it's going. Or use a ball, it moves forward when you throw it.
That's a great example. ChatGPT does love giving those types of examples when you ask it to explain to younger ages. I asked it to explain ChatGPT to a 7-year-old, and it talked to me about Pokemon. It built like a whole example using Pokemon is what it did. Did you feel like it made sense? The math explanation, did that make sense to you, Pam?
Yeah, it does.
Great. Well, I encourage you all to keep playing with it. And the thing I'll end with is just, now that you've tried it on one chatbot.
Eric, we have time for one or two more. We still have 30 minutes left, so I think we're good, right?
Well, we need to make time for the ethical stuff after.
Okay, great. All right.
So I would just end with saying that, like, try it with other chatbots, because Susan, myself, others who have done this, we find very visibly when you look at different chat programs, the outputs are varied quite noticeably. The language that is used, the types of examples, it does change. Claude versus ChatGPT versus Bing versus any of them. You're going to get different types of outputs. So I want to make sure that you think about that and pay attention and try that out to see which one works best for you, because every AI tool, it is a tool. Think of all these AI tools as bits in your toolbox. They have purposes. So try it out, play around with them, and hopefully this little covering of prompt creation and refining has been helpful, not provoking for you. And now we're going to move into a discussion about ethics and equity in AI.
Okay, so we first want to hear from a faculty member, and then Van and I are going to speak a little bit about what's happening globally and some ways to think about institution-wide policies. But it's important to think about and understand that a lot of these data sets have algorithmic bias. So we're going to speak to what that means. But first hear from Nancy about how she's thought about equity in AI in her classroom.
But I had students, many students, I had neurodivergent students, I had students from all over the world in my classroom doing this. And I heard that, you know, it's difficult to learn through the veil of language, you know, sort of sort out the language before you can get into the learning. So speakers of other languages used chat. They used it to try to decipher what the words mean, what the instructions mean, and sort of translate it for them. And then they know, and then they dig in, and then they could do it. So I had a student who was pretty deep on the spectrum of autism, and she was very clear about the fact that she uses AI to help her, because one of her issues was she has no filter. So she would say things very bluntly that would upset everybody else in the class, but she wasn't meaning to. It's just the way that she processed information and then repeat and spoke. So she used chat to say, how can I say this in a more socially acceptable way? And chat would give her a nicer way to say it, and she would respond like that. It worked beautifully. I had a student from Iran who was telling me that he and his whole study group come together, and they use it to sort of figure out, you know, how to, again, the language barrier, the differences, and not to cheat. None of them to cheat. You know, I think faculty is often afraid that they're going to cheat, you know, but there's always somebody who's going to cheat, right? We can't play to them. We have to play to the students who are there to learn, which I think are certainly the majority of students. So in terms of ethics, there's a couple different ideas, right? You know, there's the ethics of balancing the playing field for students who are neurodivergent or don't speak English as a primary language and are in the same classroom as people who do. So that there's an ethics to that as well. So yeah, I'm a fan. We do need to be careful with it. We do need to learn about it before we start using it. And I think it's important for our students to learn what it is and how it works before they use it. That's our job.
Well said by Nancy, and appreciating that she says at the end, we need to know how it works and we need to know about it in order to use it ethically and use it well. And so one of the pieces that we want to teach you or have you be thinking about both at the institution-wide level and at your classroom level is that it does have algorithmic bias. We all are biased as humans. It's naturally inherent in us, and these data sets and the internet are mirroring that. And it's reflecting a lot of societal inequalities that are already existing. So it's going to require us to really engage critical thinking skills and understand that the impact of these educational tools can amplify those biases through the personalized learning of the algorithms that are going to keep training it over time. Next slide. So one of the things that we're happy to speak to, actually, go to that transparency slide. I realize they're flipped. Is to have awareness, which I'm telling you now, and engagement. So it's possible, and we encourage to do hands-on demonstrations, data analysis exercises, and really help students recognize that they're going to be affected groups that can be marginalized because of these data sets that are going to have bias. And I think that's an important conversation to have overall, especially as this tool is coming into our classrooms. So being transparent about that and naming what that is going to really help your students and help the classroom to build trust. And going back to that other slide, Eric, there is an Algorithmic Bias Accountability Act that's coming on the floor of the Senate by Senator Ron Wyden. I have not heard the update yet, but this is called the Algorithmic Accountability Act. And this is really going to be speaking to the impact of automated decision-making for employers. And that's been a real problem even before some of the generative AI. So we just wanted to signal to you that at the national level, there are conversations going on and there's legislation that's being discussed right now in our government. And now I'll pass it over to Van.
Thanks, Susan. So one of the things that we think is really critical at both the classroom level and the institutional level is to have conversations with your students, with your colleagues, with other staff on campus about what is the ethical and the responsible use of artificial intelligence, that really should ground a lot of the decisions that we're making, and that we need to be making those decisions collectively as a community. There are a few different ethical criteria that you can use as to start those conversations. One that's really good, actually, if you could go back, please, Eric. One that's really good is the White House AI Bill of Rights. This came out last fall. And there are sort of 5 pieces to it. And these are 5 issues that it doesn't matter if it's the classroom level, it doesn't matter if it's at the institutional level, that each of these issues needs to be discussed, and you need to have a conversation around what that's going to mean for your institution and what that's going to mean for you. The first is that AI systems should be safe and effective. One of the things that oftentimes happens, as Susan has mentioned, is that we see algorithmic bias in these that comes out. It comes out because we have because of the training data that's used to train these AIs, but also just because of who creates them. There's going to always be bias in what we do. And so the first criteria is that there should be safe and effective systems, that these systems should do no harm, first and foremost, just like in medicine. The AI should do no harm. The second is to be aware of those algorithmic biases and to make sure that it doesn't discriminate against any group of students. The third has to do with privacy. And particularly data privacy. One of the things that can happen if you read the fine print on some of these AI GPTs is that what you input into it will become part of the training data. And so you really need to be aware. It's wonderful to be able to help build scenarios. It's wonderful, as Susan and Eric have talked about, in terms of prompting, to prompt with hypotheticals. But you want to be very mindful of inputting your own intellectual property, as well as inputting the intellectual property of your students, and making sure that there's no personally identifiable information that's ever put into a GPT, because we don't want that going out into the wild. The fourth is notice and explanation, and that really has to do with transparency. And we've talked a little bit about that today, but it's that importance of being transparent with your students, the way that you're using it. It's important for your institution to be transparent with the way that it's being used, that the institutional administrators are using it and staff are using it, so that there can be an informed discussion around, here's why we're using AI in this way, here's the benefits of doing it, here's what we're doing to mitigate risks. So that transparency, that notice and explanation, that ability to explain how you're using it, why you're using it, and when you're using it is really critical. And it will help create an atmosphere of transparency in the classroom as well, an atmosphere that everyone is involved in making these decisions and involved in the educational process. And then finally, the White House AI Bill of Rights talks about human alternatives, considerations, and fallbacks. And this is this concept that it's really critical if you're going to, it's really critical that if AI is ever going to be used to make a decision, that there's a human that is taking a look at that decision. That there is always a human element in the loop here. And that's really what this is about. AI is not a solution in and of itself. It's a tool. And so there's always that need for that human element to be checking it, to be making sure that it's being used in a way that's responsible, to make sure that it's not, that you're not seeing algorithmic bias creep in to your lessons, but making sure that there's always that human element there. And then Eric, if you can go to the next slide. So at WCET, one of the things that we've done is we've created a policy and practice framework. And if you look, ethical and responsible use of AI is really the foundation of these three categories. And we suggest that institutions and faculty in the classroom really need to think about three areas of policy: governance policies, operations policies, and pedagogy policies. And I want to pull out 4 of those and just talk really briefly about them. One is inclusive and equitable access. You know, there are some great free resources out there, but that's something that we need to be aware of, is that some of these resources, some of the premium versions of these resources are beginning to go behind firewalls. And so thinking about how do you make sure that all of your students have access to the appropriate version of these tools is really critical. It's also critical to make sure that all of your faculty have access to the appropriate versions of these tools, especially as more of the premium versions go behind paywalls. You know, it's $20 a month to use GPT-4. It's $20 a month to use some of the other premium versions of tools that are out there. You know, I was in a community college meeting last month, and somebody from the Institute for the Future was talking about AI in higher education. And he made a statement that many of us in the room found very disturbing. And that was, well, anybody can afford $20 a month. And we all know that for many of our students, that's simply not the case. And so thinking about what is inclusive and equitable access to AI going to look like in your classroom and on your campus. Thinking about academic integrity. And perhaps AI is going to force us to think about academic integrity a little bit differently, because I think it is forcing us to really consider what is it that our assessments are assessing. What is it that we want our students to know, but also just as importantly, what do we want our students to be able to do? It's that knowledge, ability, and skills. And for so long, many of our assessments have focused on knowledge and perhaps not as much on ability and skills. And so academic integrity in defining that for your students. Changing assessment practices. Susan's talked and Eric have talked a little bit about this as in terms of how important it is to, again, sort of begin to think about authentic assessments. What is it that we can do to make sure that our students have the ability to leverage knowledge, that ability and skills piece, and not just the knowledge piece? And I don't have this highlighted, but I think that this is a really critical one that sort of underlies many of these, and that's clear communication to our students regarding our expectations. We've talked at WCET, we've talked with students before, and they talk about how frustrated they get because it's not clear to them from class to class what the professor's expectation is. And they understand that different subjects and different professors are going to have different expectations, but there lacks a clarity around that. And many times what they've told us is, we want to do the right thing. We want to be able to use these tools in a way that are appropriate for the class, but we just don't know. And so remembering to clearly communicate what our expectations are to our students. And then the final one that I want to highlight here really quickly is learner accessibility. Some of these tools do not play well with screen readers. So this is a double-edged sword here. Some of these tools are really great, especially text-to-speech tools, can be really useful, particularly for learners with visual who are visually impaired. But by that same token, some of these tools also do not play well with screen readers. They are trained on English language, and that becomes really difficult in terms of how they respond to some of our non-native English speakers. And so being really aware and making sure that you're talking with your Office of Accessibility so that you always know if you're using these tools in your classroom, that all of your students have access to the tools and all of your students are able to use those tools in a way that's accessible for every student. I want to stop there for a moment and take a couple of minutes to talk about as a group, to talk a little bit about how you think you can be engaged in a campus-wide conversation around these activities. So think about the way that you might use AI in your class. Think about the way that it's being discussed in your campus. And what are the policy areas that are going to be the most important for you to consider? As you think about your use of AI in your classroom, but also as you think about how your campus is having conversations about AI, what are the policy areas that you need to prioritize? And feel free to put it in chat, feel free to come off mute and speak to the room, whatever you're most comfortable with.
You all could be thinking about in your classroom the data sets you're looking at and how you could be thinking about in your level.
Melinda, do you want to speak over to what you put in the chat? Because I think it's a really critical point, and I don't want it to get lost.
Hi. Yeah, I was just thinking about it, and it's inspired by what I think it's Michigan University, or University of Michigan in Dearborn, that they have already developed a policy where they're not accepting any kind of academic integrity case if they're using any kind of like AI tool to detect work, because they want to kind of like think of the students of not they're using it to cheat, but they're using it as a resource. They're using it because they want to learn. And he's kind of like trying to change that discourse of thinking that the students that use it for bad reasons and not because it's actually, as in the video that was shown at the beginning, is because anybody can have access to this. And probably this is the best, like the only example in history where a technology advance is actually accessible for everybody, right? Usually advances in science and technology, they get the people who do not have high socioeconomical levels after years and years. But this is not the case now, right? So how we can just not assume that because if our students need that, because of the educational debt we have with them, we're assuming that they're going to be using it for cheating. We should just really kind of like be on their side and kind of like learn together with them what is the best way to use AI.
Yeah, I love what so I'm a historian by training, and I think you're very right that we're seeing a technology that is becoming ubiquitous in a way that we haven't seen technologies before, and something that can be a real leveling. and something that can really empower learners in ways that we've not seen technologies empower learners before. And it makes us, or it's going to, I think, force us, if we haven't already begun, to think about what is academic integrity in a very different way. And perhaps from an asset, a student asset way, rather than just assuming that that the student is trying to cheat. So it really does force a rethinking of academic integrity. Other thoughts about the policy areas that may be the most important for you to address? One of the ones that we haven't talked about, but I think would be remiss if we didn't mention, is intellectual property. One of the challenges right now with these tools is that the United States Copyright Office actually hasn't made decisions yet about how do you copyright or not copyright the output of AI. But also remember, for many of these GPT models, what you put in becomes part of their training set. And so being careful to think about not just data privacy, but being careful to think about your own intellectual property and making sure that you don't put anything out there into the world that you don't want into the world to become part of that training set. Yeah, Melina, I see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, it's like this session is so good that I cannot, like I need to say something. I don't know if you are familiar with the work of Renee Cummings. She is in Virginia, and she talks about how do we define cheating and how do we define copyright and plagiarism with AI when the data used by the companies who develop AI was plagiarized because they never asked for permission to actually use that data. So from the inception of the tools, there is an infringement of copyright. So that's like a loophole that we need to figure out how come out of it without being kind of like punishing the users and not realizing what were the mistakes from the beginning by the developers. So it's a very complex situation.
It is. It's extraordinarily complex. And again, sort of raises those questions about intellectual property. It raises those questions about algorithmic bias. And it raises questions, some philosophical questions about what is academic integrity. Susan, I'm going to turn it back over to you to wrap up with some Q&A.
Great. I'm loving these comments, especially around the complexity piece. And Milena, I actually was part of a Colorado state legislative bill last night, and colleagues testified against actually regulation of the data sets. And I was for and proponent for the bill, and it's been a really challenging conversation. And it's getting at what you were speaking to is not just intellectual property, but it has been plagiarized from the start. And there is a step in every LLM development process that's called explainability. And there's a technical parameter that the bill is going to require companies to give to all users and state so that you have choice and you understand how the data sets are being utilized and how the models work. That's coming down the pike, but it's been interesting. What you spoke to is very much on the minds of the masses right now. So we open it up to all kinds of questions or comments. We can continue in the policy discussion that Van just presented in thinking about what you need support on, what you're grappling with on the policy level, but also in your classrooms. And we always appreciate more ideas that may be getting generated through what happened today. But we have some moments for you to ask questions.
I have a question. I was just waiting for people to talk.
Yes, thank you.
So I put it in the chat earlier about how to create chatbots to be tutors in some courses like the Corequisite. Because, you know, in community colleges like mine, like the first service that goes down when there are budget crises are tutors, right? And then you have a full body of students who need support, and they might be working, they might not be able to go to the reduced hours of the tutoring center, and to leave that responsibility for them to use the AI tools to do it, I think is too much, because they can just be misled. So I wish there was more support institutionally, or like funding and things like that, so we can create those chatbot tutors for certain courses and then have them available for them, and then kind of like equalize the ground for, you know, for those students who need the support.
Yeah. I'm very much predicting, Elena, that the enterprise versions are going to be coming sooner than later, but they are costly. And so that's where I'm already hearing in your voice that, you know, we need the funds to be able to build an enterprise version that's specific to our campuses, so students really get that personalized support, and the data sets are safe, right? That they are our own. And we can point to those that we know have integrity to them and protect our intellectual property. That's the promise, right? So we started this all out with saying there's a promise here. We're not there yet. And what do we need to do within the transitionary period of that? And I'm very much hoping, and I know Van is too, that in our where we sit at WCET, Achieving the Dream, and with Julie at Strong Start to Finish, that we want to be advocates for getting those funds to you and being able to provide those enterprise versions that are going to be critical to enhancing your efforts. All right, in the chat, we have not, oh.
No, I was gonna add really quickly, Susan. The one thing that I would add to what Susan said is that increasingly it takes less and less technical skills to be able to create these bots, and that we may be able to leverage our students to help us do that, because our students in many cases may have the technical expertise. And in one case down at the University of Texas at San Antonio, they actually have a program where they're pairing a student with a faculty member, because the student has the technical expertise in terms of how to create the bot. The faculty member has the subject matter expertise, and they're able to work together to do that. So there may be some ways to also leverage our students and to bring students into the conversation and the process.
Wonderful. And I love Jack's comment, you know, having this be a support for students, you know, stressing on how to help the underprepared students. And that's what this whole piece is about for Corequisite, that we can do that as long as we can trust the outputs by teaching students to validate, but by also getting our institutions to clean up the data, right? So there's data stewardship that's really going to help with that as well. But yeah, the power is now here, and it's so ubiquitous, and even we saw 3.5 worked so well for Brad. We want you to keep testing, keep experimenting, keep playing with it, not to be too scared of it, right? But let's try it out and have the students see what happens. I love the comment from Beth Rudden, who's a colleague of mine, who's actually doing data stewardship in one of by starting an AI company just for that reason. And she speaks to the idea that every college classroom is a laboratory right now for AI. So you have an opportunity to really teach us as well as we can teach you, and we can work together to really solve these issues. So with that, we turn it over to Julie.
Thanks, Susan and Van and Eric, and thank you all for your questions, your ideas, your thoughts today, and your examples that you shared. This has been really wonderful. I'm going to take over the screen for just another second, only to say, thank you again for being here. And we value your feedback and would really appreciate it if you could please take just a couple minutes while the experience is fresh to share your thoughts and opinions about today's session. There's going to be a link to the survey in the chat momentarily. And I'll also say that there's going to be additional DevEd Reform Learning Community sessions that will be announced in the coming months. This was part of a wonderful 2-part series, but there will be more to come with Strong Start to Finish. So we hope to see you at those events. You can stay up to date on all Strong Start to Finish events by subscribing to our newsletter. The link to that is also in the chat, or you could sign up via our website. If you do have any questions about the session today or about developmental education reform and co-requisites or anything like that in general, I hope you do reach out to us. We would love to chat. And then lastly, just want to thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at a future event soon. Thanks, everyone. Take care.